And then in the last one, dynamic stretching seems to be kind of preferred through the studies. So duration of stretching. Duration of stretching was the main point of a lot of the studies, and they said that duration of stretching impacted it. So they were saying that if you only see the negative effects if you stretch longer, but in this study, it says that that doesn't really matter. No matter how long you're going to stretch, you're going to see those negative effects. So in this study, the participants did it for either 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and they saw negative results of about the same percent in each of them. So those were a few of the studies, and then there are also ones regarding just general reasons for the deficits, effects on sprint times, effects in PE class, effects on longer distance running, jump height, effects in incremental cycling tests, and on the treadmill. So there were a bunch of different topics through those 15 articles. And then here I just outlined a bunch of the main results from those. So for general reasons why the deficits occur, so a stiffer muscle tendon unit is able to produce more force, but when you stretch it, that tendon becomes less stiff, so then you aren't able to produce as much force. And then, so dynamic stretching, in all of these studies, it never showed any of the negative effects. It always had positive effects. So that's why it seems to be kind of preferred, because there was one specific study where static stretching didn't really cause negative impacts, but it also wasn't beneficial to the individual, and dynamic stretching was beneficial. It was improving their performance, so that's where it seems to be preferred. And then one of the studies, the researchers just used studies or information from over 100 different studies and concluded more data regarding strength, power, explosive movements. And what they found was a definite decrease in all of them. So that showed that there wasn't just a few studies saying that these negative effects are occurring. It was a lot of studies coming to the same result. So that's why it's kind of hard to ignore, since a lot of the researchers are coming to the same conclusion about pre-exercise static stretching. So sprint times was a big thing. There was a study with LSU sprinters that were actually on the LSU track team. And they did a warm-up and then either static stretching or no stretching, and then 40-meter sprints. And their sprint times were worse when they had done static stretching prior to it. And in PE class, a lot of times the warm-up is like a few laps around the gym and then some static stretching. But with all these studies, some PE teachers were wondering, why are we using this if it's not actually beneficial? So there's already such limited time in PE class, and you don't want to waste the time for the kids. So the article kind of encourages PE teachers to start using just more of a dynamic warm-up that increases in intensity and actually gets the kids ready for the activity that they're about to do. There was many studies with incremental cycling tests. So work rate, maximal contraction, and net efficiency were measured in these. So the group that stretched, they were having to push harder on the pedals during cycling to keep up with the group that didn't stretch. So essentially they were having to work harder to produce the same results. And since they weren't able to produce as much force, their maximal contraction wasn't as great. And then their efficiency was worse because they were needing more oxygen, and they were getting their time to exhaustion was shorter. There were also a few tests on a treadmill. So anaerobic threshold was measured. So this meant that the group that stretched, their lactic acid increased sooner than the other group. And also after the treadmill test finished, the group that stretched had a worse recovering heart rate, so it took longer for them to recover back to normal. And then there was that study on sprints, but there was also one with a little bit longer distance running. So it was a 3K time trial, and in this type of running, it said the racers usually like to begin with a fast start. But the static stretching impeded their ability to do so because they weren't able to produce as much force, so they weren't able to start sprinting. So the racers weren't able to achieve their pacing strategy, but it didn't significantly affect the overall time of the race. So that meant that the static stretching effects wore off as the race went on. And these individuals also did a drop jump test, and their jump height was worse after this. So that's another aspect that static stretching affects. And then one other reason that people may use static stretching is to possibly prevent cramps, such as in your calves. So this article says that when Golgi tendon organ inhibition is elevated, cramps are prevented. And it's thought that static stretching increases this inhibition, but in the study it doesn't. So Golgi tendon organs, they sense tension in the muscle, and so if they sense a lot of tension, they're possibly able to prevent the cramp. And so it's thought that static stretching helps these organs do their job better, but it actually doesn't. So cramps aren't more prevented through this type of stretching. So through this project, I was able to see in what situations, like with sprinting and weight training, that static stretching can really have a lot of big negative effects. And I was also able to see that dynamic stretching never had those side effects that the static stretching caused. So we came to the conclusion that dynamic stretching should really be used before exercise and then static stretching after. And also just trying to encourage people to have like a regular stretching routine that's unrelated to the time that you exercise, so that it's not possibly causing those effects. And then lastly, none of these studies say that static stretching isn't important. It is still really important, but the timing of the stretch is a lot more important than many people may realize. Thank you.